Hello and a very warm welcome back to episode 2 of the Jarrang Sessions, the podcast that speaks to some of the biggest names in the email marketing industry. First episode we had with Nick Crawford and Hannah Vaughan is up and ready for you to watch or listen to. So after you're done with today's session, if you haven't already had a look at that one, do go ahead, would encourage that. But focusing on today, we're talking about data and we've got two more brilliant guests. So first of all, joining me from the Jarrang side, none other than the managing director and founder of Jarrang, Stafford Sumner. So Stafford, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us on, Ben.
And as always, massively appreciating the brand right behind, you've got the placement perfect.
I mean, I could have obviously gone for the background on Zoom, but I decided to go full hog and paint the wall instead.
Good stuff. And we have also got Humphreys. So he is an email marketing specialist, sits on the email council for the DMA. So, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. And I'm joined with my lockdown locks. So I hope they're not taking up too much of the screen.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
I think we're just about all right. Just about okay. As I said in the intro, today's topic is data. How do you obtain it? How do you use it? How do you audit it? Everything to do with data. It might not be the sexiest part of email marketing, if indeed there is such a thing, but it's definitely worth a podcast in its own right due to its importance. But before we get going on data, there's one thing that we ask, or we are going to ask, I guess, of all of our guests. The first question of why email is important to you specifically. So, and I'm interested to know sort of what drove you to email and why do you think it's valuable?
Up until about 6 years ago, I was sort of fairly agnostic on a digital channel, and then I happened to go and work for an email service provider, and suddenly sort of woke to the power that the medium of email actually has, and that if used properly, it can drive significant return on investment for organisations, and that email from a geeky techie point of view, email goes beyond just putting some words and pictures together with a bit of data and shoving it out the door. There's a whole host of other bits and pieces behind the scenes, some alchemy that goes on to try and make sure that email hits the inbox as intended, and then all the analytics behind it. Being able to know what device somebody's opening their email on, whereabouts in the world they might be when they're opening, and then using that sort of insight and knowledge to really drive that experience for the recipient, because ultimately brands send emails to get people to do things, to compel them to interact with that brand. And so using that insight to drive better, more relevant, more timely communications, I just find that weirdly exciting.
Oh yeah, I don't find that weird at all. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
You ask my friends down the pub, they think it's weird.
It's I mean, on an email marketing podcast, you're perhaps in the most safe hands when it comes to people who might not find that weird. So you've chosen the best place to share that. But moving on to data, one of the first things I want to ask, because a lot of people listening might think of data and immediately think of an email address, full stop, nothing else, when we know that data is a lot wider reaching than that. So why is data so much more than just picking up that email address?
Data is two things really. It is that email address. It's the attributes to that email address that help a brand organize, segment, and understand their audience. There are sort of two key reasons people unsubscribe from email, and that's lack of relevance or frequency. So you've got the email address and all the attributes to that email address that help you segment and target your audience. And then you've got the what I call the engagement data. That's the data you get back from your email service provider that tells you how that individual or that segment have interacted with your email, so that you can then learn from that and take your next email to the next level.
What are your thoughts on that, Stafford? Because the email address is the thing you need to send to people, but as Ant sort of alludes to, it does go much further than that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, in the email marketing world, we obviously use the email address as the unique identifier, as Ant says, but it's not just the profile fields that come with it either. That's things like the postcode that we could use for geo-targeting, for example. But it's also the past behavior. So, for example, the last time somebody purchased, or the amount they've spent in total, or indeed, what they may have browsed. Taking all of these pieces of information, be them profile fields or behavioral data, that combines with that chemistry set that Ant talked about in his intro there, that you bring all of this together with the creative and serve up personalized and relevant information or personalized relevant communications that will then move forward to the goal that you have, be that particular sales, driving sales of particular products, or whatever the objective of that particular campaign is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power, I guess, is a phrase that's used quite a lot. But it extends so much more than just knowing that you can reach someone. It's then how you reach them as well. You do have all of those at your disposal. I mean, the engagement, that's a very underutilized tool, I would say. And even going back to the most simple of profile fields that can enable personalization and segmentation is still, I think, underutilized. And you're absolutely right in what you say. When people unsubscribe, it is often due to a lack of relevancy. So this is something we picked up on in the first podcast as well, and I'm sure this isn't the last time we will pick up on it, and not because we haven't got a lot to say, but it's because it is such an important thing within the world of email marketing. Looking at a database itself, because there will be a mixture of people listening, I'm sure, who have a full database, maybe in the thousands of people. There will be some that are just starting up and don't have a lot. Are there any tips that you would have, regardless of your database size, in terms of how to utilize the data?
I think key with data is, and I hope I'm not going to scare people by using these four initials, is to look to the principles of GDPR. Look at the data privacy principles and align your data to that. Minimization, accuracy. Two key principles that I live by is that when you start, let's say you're starting out, you're a new business, you want to start sending emails. As Stafford said, the basic bit of data you need is an email address. And if that's all you're going to do is send an email, that's all you need to collect. Yes, you can, and I've seen sign-up forms that have 10 fields, more fields, first name, last name, title, date of birth, postcode, opt in to send postal market. All I wanted to do was sign up for an email. So keep your sign-up process simple, because you can always go back and ask the person for more information later on. Remember in the old days of books, there was the Encyclopedia Britannica. They've got a digital offering. When you sign up for that, all they literally ask you for is an email address. The first email they send you has a button that says "Tell me more," and it takes you through to a form where they start to ask you more information about you, so they can serve you content that matters to you. We used to call that progressive profiling. It's probably got a new funkier name to it than that, but it does what it says on the tin. You start off by collecting the minimum amount of data, and then you build up what you need as you need it for the process that you're going to put that customer through. If you step outside of that, if all you're doing is getting somebody to sign up for an email, and you ask them for their entire life history, you're actually stepping outside of the data protection principles of relevancy, data minimization. So if you collect more data than you actually need, you're doing two things. One, you're going to put people off signing up in the first place. They're going to say, why do they want to know all that information when all I want from them is an email? Where in the same way that any relationship starts, you meet somebody at a business meeting, if you remember those. You shake hands, you say your name, say where you work. You don't ask that person for their entire life history right at the start of that relationship. The same should work when you're starting to build a database. Also, if you're asking for more data than you actually need to serve the process, you're stepping outside of the realms of the data protection principles, because data should be relevant and limited to the process necessary. And as I say, as your need to provide that relevancy to your customer increases, then they will start to give you more data anyway, because they'll see the value exchange. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some sign up forms that are lengthy, I think is probably the nice way to put it. And I'm sure, Stafford, you've seen the same thing. But I always see it as when you are collecting data, I think people get in the mindset of people don't want to give any information away, whereas I think it is much more orientated towards people what don't want to give information away that has no value to them. Whereas, and at the start of that relationship, there is very little indication that there will be value to giving away this bit of information or that bit of information. Whereas once you've started emailing them and you are further in that relationship, there might be more of an inclination for them to think, hang on a minute, maybe there's actually value in me giving this to them. That could make the email marketing better. Maybe there's already something they've given over that implies it. I mean, Seven, what's your thoughts on this? We've seen some sign up forms that can be very, very lengthy and not to their benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry for coming up for 20 years now, and marketeers, and I'll put myself in that category as well. We're like magpies. We like collecting data because we think the more data we have, the more knowledge we have, and the more knowledge we've got, the better we'll be at our job. So there is always this tendency to ask for as much as we possibly can, because that would be useful to have the postcode, or that would be useful to have date of birth, or whatever it happens to be. But of course, we all know from a practical sense on the ground, there is a direct correlation between the amount of fields you ask for and the number of people that actually go through with the submission of the form. So the more fields, fewer people we get. There's a point of equilibrium that you need to find what's optimum for your knowledge and what's optimum for the comfort zone of the punter that's signing up. But I think also people know the value of their data nowadays. That's the point. People know that their data is it's valuable, that there is a value exchange, like you said, Ben, but people know that the more they give you, the more they're giving away. So there's got to be something better coming back. I think that also they know there's a risk element as well. Giving you too much information, if they don't know you, might result in something negative happening to them in the future. Whereas it's slightly different, perhaps, if you're in a customer relationship. If I'm coming to your store, Ben, and I'm buying something on your e-commerce store, I'm giving you my details. I'm telling you what I'm buying, give my credit card details. There's a actual exchange there of a service or a product that I'm buying from you. You're naturally capturing data in the course of that transaction, and depending on how you're set up, you may or may not utilize that data within the regulations to be able to communicate with me in the future. But I think that's kind of my general kind of summary on it, that people know what their data's worth, and they want to know what they're going to get back for it.
Can I come in on there? Because I think what we should add, the bit that I think is missing is there's also a contextual element to it. If you're an online fashion brand, the chances are the person signing up to email purely to get that initial discount code, and that's all they're interested in. Whereas perhaps if you're signing up to some sort of charity, you might be prepared to give them more information. But what is key from the marketer's point of view is making it clear and transparent why you're asking for certain information. So, for example, if somebody's signing up for email, and you're asking them to give you a postcode, explain to them why you want the postcode. Would you like to receive regional information based on your local area? Yes. For that, we need your postcode. Brackets, don't worry, we're not going to send you stuff through the post. But if you're collecting that postcode, you've then got to make sure those emails are targeted to that person's location. Likewise, if, for example, you're a brand that sign up with us and we'll send you a free T-shirt, and for that promotion you ask the person what the size of T-shirt is. Once you've fulfilled that promotion and sent them the T-shirt, and if there's a warranty, on the T-shirt, once that's expired, then back to the sort of data minimization, data storage principles. You need to jettison that data. You no longer need to have that person's T-shirt size if you're no longer going to be sending them a free T-shirt. So it boils down to that brand being open, honest, and transparent about what they're collecting, why they're collecting it, what they're using it for, and then making sure that they don't use it beyond the sort of time limit of that particular process. I think then people are, as you rightly say, Stafford, but people are aware of the value of their data and what it means to a brand. I think they're there. If you've got that clear value exchange and you've got some sense of trust in the brand, you'll give that data over. People are happy to put their life story on Facebook. For some reason, they believe that data is safe and it's not going anywhere. Not implying that there's anything untoward about Facebook at all, but they're prepared to give it because the value exchange they get by giving that data is they get that experience of telling everyone how wonderful their life is. And the feedback and the recognition that they want from that, or the insight and the news they get from it. So they're prepared to give that. The same with using Gmail. They're prepared to use a free mailbox provider such as Gmail, knowing full well if they read any news that even Amazon sending you an order acknowledgement that the likes of Google can read those emails and know that you've just ordered Jarrang's the history of Jarrang or Stafford's memoirs on Amazon, and serve you advertising on that basis. So now Amazon don't actually put in their emails what it is you've ordered. It just thank you for your order, and here's a link back to the website if you want to view what you've ordered. So we do need to make sure as marketers that we are clear as to what the value exchange is, what we're going to do with that data, how long we're going to keep it, and if it's contextual, I'm sure the customer, the data subject, will part with that information.
Well, I mean, apart from the devastating news in that our sponsorship agreement with Facebook is probably in the bin. I mean,
what about my memoirs though? That was a good pitch for that. Thanks, Ant.
Yeah,
I'm on the pre-order list.
You and maybe someone else. I'm kidding, of course. But I mean, going back to that, and I'm sure elements of this question are going to have already been touched upon by you, Ant, but if people are thinking about application now, so they know the theory of this, they know that they should be getting this data once the relationship has been cultivated, perhaps. How do you, in application, go back to 1,000 people or however many people it is and get this data, knowing that the people that are existing on your database as well aren't all going to have been on there at the same time? Some people might have been there for years. Some of them might have only been there for weeks. How do you go about applying some of what we've been speaking about here?
So you're talking about sort of enhancing that data, getting greater insight into the individual. In my view, is down to the content of the emails you're sending out and other sort of online insights you can gather. Knowing what somebody's clicked on, for example, questionnaires, surveys, getting them back to your website, looking at the pages that they're clicking through, and trying to understand what it is that is relevant to that person. And you've got two ways, in my view. I'm a big believer in data efficacy, in that I want the brand to ask me what I want rather than trying to guess it because I fit into a particular social category, for example. So, if you want to know what content I want in my emails, ask me. Provide me with a preference center, for example. Or in an email, say, what's your favorite color, red or blue? I click red. You now know, because it's an explicit preference that I clicked on, that I like red. In which case, you can ask your data team to put a list of everyone's clicked the red link and send them lots of information about red, and therefore exclude them from anything about blue, because you know that blue doesn't engage them. Down the colour route, I've made the mistake before of saying, what's your favourite bird, or what's your favourite, and I've ended up ruining sponsorship deals. So, I've stopped doing that. So, do you like red? Do you like blue? When they go down the red route, you can then send them an email saying, what shade of red do you like? Do you like the pinker side? Do you like oranges? Do you like red? They click on that, and then you take them further down that funnel and use email like a sorting hat, I suppose, to the point that you've now got a persona of somebody who likes red, but specifically likes bright red, and specific like solid red. And that way you start to augment your data with new attributes that you can then use for your segmentation, your targeting. And what is really key is to understand, is to realise, and I don't think a lot of marketers do this, is to realise that people do change their minds. Once upon a time, people that like Coca-Cola loved Coca-Cola until they brought out Diet Coke. And then you split the camp. Some people like Diet Coke, some people like Coca-Cola still. If all you're sending is promotions about Coca-Cola, you're going to alienate the people that now prefer Diet Coke. Other cola brands do exist. So you've got to provide an opportunity for people to change that preference. And again, you do that by inviting them to come back to your website, to log into their account, to change their options, put a preference center link at the bottom of the email next to the unsubscribe link, maybe. Or as I used to do when I was working for the ESP, I was working with a well-known banking group, and we actually put the preference center link in the body of the email because we didn't want people searching down to the unsubscribe link where preference center links often are, because by the time they get down there, they might just click on the unsubscribe. So we actually put in the main body of the email a button, update your preferences, change your subscription. And that worked really well. We saw their unsubscribes go down quite substantially, but we also equally saw engagement go up because people were able to change the topics of interest as they desired, which was and I think we should take more advantage of things like that.
What are your thoughts, Stafford, on well, let's pick out the sort of interactivity within email leading to profile attributes. What's your thoughts on that being a tactic?
Yeah, I think it's great. As Ant says, it's about serving up relevant information. I totally agree with what you're saying, Ant, about people need to have the ability to change their minds. I mean, but also changing within their life journey as well. So, for example, we were working with a retailer that sold children's clothes. So they were targeting people who had bought children's clothes in the past on the basis that they were buying for a child, either they were a parent or a grandparent themselves. But at some point, those children grow and they become adults, and
they do.
The person who perhaps bought the little jackets for a 5-year-old, no longer wants to buy jackets for 5-year-olds because their 5-year-old is now a 15-year-old, and or that child's left home or whatever. So I think that there has to be some common sense applied to targeting, that you can go down a route for a certain amount of time. It does depend on the product or service that you're offering. I think in terms of behavioural side of things, I really do like, for me, when I've received an email, that I sometimes get follow-up messages based on what I've clicked on within the email itself. So, for example, back when we could travel, if you guys remember back that far, back in the day, those aeroplanes that used to go across the skies, just getting an email in from Virgin Travel and having a look at some of the holidays that were on there, clicking on one, just say for example, there's a holiday to the Caribbean, having a look around, not necessarily booking, but being followed up 4 hours later or so with a follow-up email very specifically upon a particular trip to the Caribbean. That was just the link that I clicked on out of maybe 6 or 7 holidays that were featured. That was a really useful touch to me, because actually the email had come in during the day. It was a busy day. I didn't really have a lot of chance to kind of read it. It came through in the evening when I was a bit more relaxed and didn't have the same demands on my time as perhaps doing the office. And it just reminded me, do you know what, we need to talk about this. This could be something we could do. I didn't necessarily book that holiday, but it just reinstated that thought process that this is something that was of interest to me. So things like that, I think, are a really powerful way of targeting and don't annoy me as a recipient too much. But it's like remarketing ads, or retargeting ads that you click on the link, you go through to a landing page, and then you get followed around for the next 2 years with a remarketing ad. They start to annoy me after a while if they go on for too long. So, for example, same issue. I was going over to Europe. I clicked on a link to book a flight, booked my flight, and then I was followed around for a month afterwards, asking whether I want to book my flight to this particular location. And it's like, no, because I've already booked my flight. I booked it through you as well. Why are you targeting me? This is completely irrelevant, and actually kind of just started to put me off those kind of things. So I think whether it's email or retargeting ads, just as long as they're used with common sense, I don't think you can apply a carte blanche framework to all of your campaigns. They need to have thought in them as to who is receiving them, what you want them to do.
I think I agree, and I think retargeting is annoying because it's indiscriminate. It doesn't know that you've already made that purchase or that you've changed your mind, and it does get frustrating. And I actually find that it reflects badly on the web, on the owner of the website where that advert is placed. Because you might go to a website for a specific reason, totally unrelated to your travels, your exotic travels to the Caribbean, Stafford. You're doing a bit of serious research, and all you're being seen is adverts for travel. But also, I think marketers have got to be careful that they don't get it wrong, and that they actually make sure the logic behind what they're doing in monitoring those preferences or those implied preferences is accurate. And for example, I'm hoping to go on a camping trekking holiday in June. Not as quite, I'm only a lowly email marketer, not owning an agency. So it's a staycation for me.
I think it's staycation for all of us at the moment, man.
Sorry, I was still stuck on the ideals of going to the Caribbean. And I was looking at some new apparel. The word seems to be becoming more popular in the English language now, rather than clothing. Apparel seems to be on everyone's websites. And I went to a well-known outdoor clothing apparel site, and I was searching for men's trekking shorts. And I placed some things in my basket. They took my email address, and I was interested to see whether I got a retargeting email, and surely enough I did, offering me 15% off women's clothing. Now,
you're all over that, right?
Yeah.
Did you suddenly change your basket?
The basket had men's trekking shorts in it. So all it had in it, the clue is in the basket, but somewhere along the line, the logic behind the process had gone wrong, and they were retargeting me with a 15% off women's clothing. And it wasn't even a Friday. So unfortunately, I haven't gone back to them, and I've gone to a different brand altogether. And it can be that simple off-putting, because even for somebody who doesn't work in the industry, I'm always looking for people to try to catch people out, but see where their logic fails. Even as a normal customer, that would put me off, thinking they got my data totally wrong. Why have I know how they sent me this email. I know it's because I've put something in my basket and they're trying to get me to buy it. Why are they trying to get me to buy what is in my basket rather than offering me something else? 15% off the men's shorts, I'd have bought them.
But funny thing, I'll just chip in before we go back to Ben. But one of the other things I noticed just on those automations, just as an example, just picking up what you were saying there, Ant, just slightly different, but is when we had lockdown kicked in last year in 2020 with the lockdown one. It was the amount of automation programs that were left running by accident. So, for example, hotels with pre and post stay emails were still being sent out, even though the hotels were closed. The marketing teams have been furloughed. People were getting like, "We're really looking forward to seeing you in 2 days' time for your stay," and people are going, "We're all locked down, we can't leave." And I think there's often that kind of set it and leave mentality with automation, whether it's retargeting emails or whether it's marketing automation, and often they're not reviewed very often or can get forgotten. We often only think about those scheduled outbound emails, and sometimes that kind of framework that we set up is a great idea when we're all sat around our kind of in our meeting room, in our planning table. But unless we continue reviewing them and analysing what's working and what isn't working, or indeed remembering that they actually exist, then it can then end up giving it, having the opposite effect and actually causing brand and reputation damage moving forward.
I think it's so easy for somebody to take an example of that, stick it across social media, across Twitter, and really lampoon the brand for that sort of silliness, which doesn't do them any good unless, of course, you've got a really good social marketing team who can capitalise on it and use it as an apology opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, that example that you gave, Stafford, is really a kick 'em whilst they're down as well, isn't it, really? They've already had to go through the disappointment of not going on that holiday or whatever it might be. And that might be understood. But then the email comes in and it's kind of just like, salt in the wounds situation there.
Yeah, really tough.
Yeah. I mean, moving on to sort of auditing your data, I think this is something we've already really picked up on, how very few profile fields, a very small amount of data is static. It's constantly evolving. You think even profile fields such as like your first name, even those aren't going to be static for some people. So if you can't rely on that to be the same all the way throughout someone's life, you can't really rely on most profile fields to remain the same. So I think in that sense, data auditing is valuable. But I just wanted to get your thoughts, Anton, why you think constant sort of reviews of your data and how you can best use that is important.
Well, I think you're right. We probably have touched on it a couple of times, and it boils back to this sort of relevancy and accuracy of data and use. So that's the primary driver to audit your data. Also, you have to bear in mind from a deliverability and sender reputation point of view, that if you're sending emails to a non-engaged audience, for example, the likes of Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo will pick up on that. They will pick up on people on the number of emails you send out versus the opens and clicks that come back, and they will derive from that the number of people who aren't touching your emails, the number of bounces, people that are sticking your email straight into a delete bin, and they'll judge your data hygiene on those metrics, and can give you deliverability issues. So when you think your emails are going out the door, they may well be, but they're probably not landing in the inbox in the timely fashion you expect them to land. So if you need no other reason than to get into a data auditing regime, it's your deliverability, your sender reputation, to ensure that you keep Gmail and Yahoo and guys really happy. If you're using a good CRM system, most fields that you have in your database will have a time date stamp as to when you acquired that bit of data. And I think it's key to keep an eye on records that do change, and if somebody hasn't changed their data or they updated their data with you on in say a year's time, okay, depends on your relationship with that individual. It's worth sending out some sort of email and sort of say, have you updated your data recently? You can also run queries to see who hasn't engaged for a while, email addresses that have bounced, remove all that from your data, and try retargeting efforts. Don't just, I think it's this day and age, it's wrong to just send to a list because you've got an email address and an opt-in. You've got to be far more clever than that. And also, I think, by auditing your data, you've got a good opportunity to spot any gaps in your segmentation. It is, at the end of the day, it is a numbers game. Some marketers will say, well, let's just send everything to it. Send our emails to everybody. Somebody will click, somebody will convert, and that's true. But actually, the more targeted you are, the more relevant you are, the more engagement you'll get for that campaign. And then you can understand who that audience is, and then take steps to recruit more of the same, and then boost your sales, boost your ROI.
Absolutely. Stafford, what's your thoughts on the sort of deliverability side of things and how keeping an engaged audience can positively help deliverability?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a bit of witchcraft is deliverability, and there are some people out there who are paid very large sums of money to keep on top of that, and that's the very, very specific niche within email marketing that there's some very capable and far more intelligent people than myself are able to talk about. But I think some of the things that we find within the agency that relate to inbox placement, and it just goes back to these common principles we've talked about. I kind of don't want to go over too much, but it's about frequency. How frequently are you sending to that database? If you're sending regularly throughout the month, it's going to be far better than if you just send an email once per year. So we want to see traffic going through those IP addresses. We want that data to be utilized. And of course, with that data being regularly sent to, it means we're continually maintaining it in terms of we're removing the hard bounces. We are understanding the people that no longer wish to hear from us better, so we don't get big spikes in unsubscribes. It's at a much lower level. In terms of engagement rates as well, with the AI learning that's being adopted within many of the ISPs, from Gmail to Hotmail to Outlook, whatever it happens to be, it's learning is what are you opening and what are you not opening. So if you get 5 emails in from the same brand and you don't do anything with it, you just delete it before you even open it, it's already learning. It's saying, he's not necessarily that interested in this. I'm just going to push that straight into the junk folder because I'm going to help him out. And I always use this adage when I'm talking to people about it. I said it's a bit like the postman walking up your driveway and deciding what mail he's going to put through your front door and what he's going to put straight in the bin without even coming to see you. It's him walking up, having a look. And
if only he would do that stuff.
Well, yes. One would hope he had more time, but that is what the effect is, and so I think but if you have more engaging content and more relevant content, which means that when the recipients do receive it, they then open it, they click on it, they do something with it. The AI is learning, oh, actually, he does want to receive that. He does want to do something with it. I will make sure that gets placed within the inbox. So, yes, I think there's an argument for frequency. There's an argument for kind of regular maintenance of that database, in terms of bounces and unsubscribes, as we talked about, and possibly even reactivation as well, where you're starting to see that, you've got, say, half of your database hasn't opened a single email within the last 12 months. Do you want to continue sending to them on the basis that they're probably not going into the inbox? Or do you want to pull those out of your regular communications and potentially try to reactivate them, utilizing some methodology, potentially like some kind of incentive within the subject line to get them to open it, or indeed suppress them from future sends and focus your efforts on fewer contacts who are more likely to convert?
You said something about sort of reactivation, and that reminded me of something that's quite key here. is that email addresses do die. So if you've got some email addresses in your database that are a couple of years old, and maybe that person has abandoned that account, that Gmail account you set up back in the day, so that you've long since forgotten about, that could be reactivated and used by one of the spam traps like Spam Cop, Spam House, and organisations like them, Gmail, will look to see if a brand suddenly starts sending to that inbox again, and that could end up putting your domain on a blacklist and stopping any of your emails going through. And I've had experience of brands doing that. They've just found an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. They thought, oh, let's give this a go, and suddenly found themselves being blacklisted. What that means is that if you get put onto a Spam House or Spam Cop blacklist, there are others, the spam filters out there look at those databases and say, this domain or this IP is on a blacklist. We will then protect them. So if you've got, if you're trying to send somebody who's protected by, say, Mimecast or Barracuda or one of those spam filters, they will look at that blacklist and will help protect your inbox, your customer's inbox, by not allowing that email to come through. More so in the B2B world, where organisations are protected by these systems. I know a client, an organisation once who had a big NHS list, and they were always querying why their emails were not getting any open or engagement, and it was because their reputation had been tarnished by constantly sending to this NHS list. The NHS mailbox was protected by a spam filter that said, oh, we can see that you're on this list. We're not even going to put you into a quarantine. We're not even going to mark you as spam. We're just going to send your emails into a black hole. Now, for the ESP that was servicing that client, that was great. They were getting pennies for sending the emails out, but the business was getting no return on their investment because the emails were just going into a black hole. So it's really key. Keep that data hygiene up. Send to less people, more targeted. You'll get a greater ROI.
Absolutely. That's really useful information for people listening and watching along. Before we wrap it up for this episode, we did ask you, Ant, to pick out an email prior to this recording that we were gonna go through the ups and downs of it, perhaps. So you picked that one from the BBC. So is there anything on this email? And if you're watching along, you'll be able to see it on the screen. If you're listening along, we'll include it in the description for you to have a look at what Ant is talking about here. But what are your initial thoughts of this email?
The reason it stuck out to me was first off was the quality of the build. It's informative. There's lots of different things, lots of different programs that it's trying to capture. It's quite clearly based on my viewing habits through the iPlayer app, and so all the content in there was definitely aimed at my viewing habits. And I thought it was a really, for the purpose of this podcast, really good indication that an organisation is using the data it's collected on me through what I've watched on their iPlayer, what I've clicked in their news app, and they've brought all that into one email to encourage me to watch programs, to promote upcoming programs that I might like to watch. And interestingly, I was involved with the DMA Awards last year, and the shortlist for the best use of email was predominantly brands that had used data-driven content, and indeed the winner was based on brilliant use of data to drive that personal content. And I felt that email from the BBC was aimed at me. I know at the same time they sent that email out, they probably sent it to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe of their of users of the BBC, but that email was actually aimed at me. It's personal, and it got time of my day to look at it, but also to make it worth me sharing with you. And it's now being seen by lots of others if they haven't received their own version.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you thought of it, Stafford, but I mean, from my perspective, I found it interesting, and this isn't to put down the email whatsoever, but design-wise, there's nothing crazy or spectacular about it. I find it really interesting that you've picked out an email that is really focused on relevancy and doesn't require fireworks and this amazing design that's clearly taken hours on hours, and you've picked out something like this. Have you got any thoughts on it, Stafford?
Well, that's right. I mean, I think it's whatever works. I think with anything, branding or messaging, it's personal to the subject, isn't it? And Ant's obviously received this. It's spoken to him. I'm sure, like me, and like many people watching today, we get hundreds of emails in our inbox each week, and we have our favorites. We have the ones that we connect with straight away. Maybe there's ones we connect with on certain days. So I mean, this one is what I like about it. It's in design terms, as you say, Ben. It's fairly basic, but it's relevant. It's visual. I like pictures. I think that's great. But it's got some accompanying text with it, which I think it makes it robust. Particularly if you're in a situation where images aren't downloading, you still know what the content is, and that's one of the issues where people go too fancy with graphics if they're not supported by the email client that's opening them, or indeed someone doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to support all of the images, and all that creative's kind of gone to waste, and people are none the wiser about what it contains. So I think like anything, fancy doesn't necessarily mean that it's necessarily better, and this is something that is simplicity that obviously works.
Yeah. I mean, touched on the relevancy, and it was certainly relevant because it was data driven. It wasn't fancy. It was fairly standard block template, but it was functional. And the other thing to think of is the actual user experience of it. And you touched on some of the sort of more fancy content that you can put in, kinetic elements, for example, video in email, data driven. These are all great things. And I've been lucky to work with a well-known coffee chain who did some fantastic stuff with data-driven content, really, really clever. But they were able to understand totally who was receiving their emails and on what devices. They knew that the majority of their customers receiving emails on an iPhone. They therefore knew that the content would work on an iPhone. Their content fell down if you opened it on something like an old installed version of Outlook. Totally fell down, didn't work, and so they had to spend a lot of money, thankfully with us, having us code their email to look at what the device was that it was being opened on. So there were fallback options for those other devices, and I think we have to be careful as marketers that we don't want to go too fancy that it falls down and generates a poor experience, because people will hit on that more so than if you send a sort of fairly vanilla email that is well constructed and relevant, as is the BBC example.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example that you've picked out. And I think that's where we will leave things for this episode. Thanks so much for your time, and indeed Stafford as well. It's been a really insightful chat, and I'm sure there's a lot of useful tips and advice for people to take away and to potentially use themselves. If you are listening to the podcast, bear in mind that you can see our faces. I can't promise much if you do go over to YouTube, so go ahead if that is definitely an option for you. If you are watching, just bear in mind, if you want to listen to us in the car or whatever, that's an option to listen to us on the podcast. We'll be back with another episode next month. That'll be episode 3. Until then, stay safe.